So I started my work as an IT consultant. So I was the guy that was actually up here like fixing your computers and setting up these screens. But the interesting thing is my life took a big turn after I did a TED presentation and talking about the work I did in my neighborhood. But a lot of things happened to me after that. But just to kind of go back and tell you some of the stories of things that I did in the neighborhood, early projects where I had an old theater in Oak Cliff, which is a neighborhood here in Dallas where we had been stigmatized as the bad part of town for years. And we had this old building that I would look at all the time and think of how can we bring this back to life? And when I would talk to the board of directors that was trying to raise money, they said we're having a hard time raising the millions of dollars that's needed because there's not a lot of philanthropy in our area because a lot of people think of this as the bad part of town. So I thought, well, why don't we gather just the community together and see if we can do something to change it? So we realized we had a lot of people in our neighborhood, a lot of artists. So we brought 100 friends out and said, why don't we get everyone to paint one piece of art each? And then we'll open up the theater and make it to an instant art gallery the next night. And so we gathered people together, and then moments before we were about to open the doors, we thought, okay, this is going to be an abject failure. Like, this is the middle of winter. It's a theater that's been closed for 10 years, and it's in the bad side of town. But when we opened the doors, we had 700 people show up. And we sold every piece of art that we had created the night before. So after that, I was excited about other projects we could take on, so I looked at old maps in my neighborhood, started trying to figure out, like, how can we get things happening again, because we need more economics, and people were talking about the businesses we need, and things weren't occurring anymore. So I started looking about what we used to have and realized we used to have an old trolley system. So I talked to some people at the Chamber of Commerce's and other meetings and said, I've got an idea. Why don't we bring back our trolley car system? And they said, that's crazy. It's been gone for half a century. You just can't bring those back. But I didn't know much about streetcars, but I knew a lot about building websites because I was an IT guy. So I went home that night and I built a fake website called the Oak Cliff Transit Authority. And it looked really official, and I had European trams and all this kind of great information on the site. And then the next week, the Dallas Morning News did a story called Dreaming of the Day the Streetcars Return. That's what Jason Roberts and other members of the recently formed Oak Cliff Transit Authority are hoping. But there were no other members. But what happened in short order was I had people in my neighborhood call me and said, we want to get involved, we want to help, we want to see what we can do to take part in this project. And we started applying for grants around the country, and we found one grant called the Tiger Grant. And we told the city of Dallas, like, look, we want to apply for this grant. They said, good luck, Oak Cliff. Apply it all you want. So we said, okay, we'll see what will happen. We had a 0.3% chance of getting any money whatsoever, but what occurred was we won millions of dollars. And instead of taking decades to bring the streetcar back, it's back again now. This is a picture of us riding with the streetcar here, again, just last year. So the last project, the one that really defined my career now, was this idea of looking at the blocks in our neighborhood and trying to understand, well, what's causing them to have problems, and realizing that a lot of them had high vacancies. We had empty streets. We had no landscaping. The zoning had been changed from retail to light industrial. And then we created all these laws and rules that either made it illegal or cost prohibitive to make these places come to life. So if we wanted flowers on the sidewalk, it was $1,000 in permitting. If we wanted to have cafes, $1,000, and it was illegal for crowds to gather. So we realized it was illegal for us to do anything to make this place come to life on its own. So what would happen if we broke every law we possibly could to make this the kind of block we wish we always had? So that's what we did. We painted our own bike lanes. We added our own cafe seating. We painted murals on the buildings. We took the empty buildings and we put businesses that we wish we always had. So coffee shops, flower shops, bookstores, art spaces. And then we printed off the laws and the rules we were breaking, and we invited our city staff and our mayor out, thinking like, okay, we're probably all going to go to jail. But what happened was they said, this is a much better block, and we'd much rather have things like this occur. And we saw a lot of things happen afterwards. A lot of these businesses started to stick. We started to see the zoning rules change, and momentum occurred around our community based on this little project. So one of the things that I started learning was this idea of, like, we need to get away from Dallas's motto of think big, and maybe because what think big does for us right now is it means we're going to take $100 million and spend it on this giant bridge that we hope is going to bring out 100 little things in our neighborhood. But what we found is the reality, the places that I love around the world, whether it's in New York or Paris or New Orleans, there are these little blocks I go to all the time that have these little coffee shops and flower shops and bookstores. And as a community, we can create 100 little things a lot faster than we can do these one big things that we hope make a lot of little things. And we found we can use special things from the hardware store, or simple things from the hardware store. So white duct tape looks just like the thermoplastic paint the cities use to paint stripes in the ground. We can use straw wattles that they use to keep erosion and trash out of the gutters during construction and make new curbs. We can take the graphics on city buses and we can make crosswalks. Then we can go look at intersections that are too wide, and we can talk to the city and say, this intersection is too fast and too scary, and we want to fix it. And they'll say it's going to take millions of dollars and years to fix, and we can say, don't worry about it, we'll do it ourselves over a weekend like this. Now, so since that time, we started getting all these people calling us around the country to help them with their own projects. And they started asking these questions like, well, how do you end up breaking all these rules and laws? I said, I find you can break any rule you want as long as you wear an orange vest. And our work started going crazy all around the country. So a lot of things started happening for us. People from Memphis calling us. People in Baltimore started calling us. People in Florida. And so we realized we had something going on here and we needed to build on this. And then the next year, the project went all the way around the world. So it went from Melbourne, Australia to Tehran, Iran. And when the people in Tehran, Iran called and asked about breaking laws, we're like, I don't know about breaking laws in Tehran, Iran. And then other great things started happening beyond that. So we started getting to have dinners with the First Lady. We started a restaurant with neighbors and friends from our Better Block projects. I decided to run for U.S. Congress because we had a free April. So all of these cool things were happening, and I'm thinking, well, what can stop us? We can transform anything in our neighborhood, and we can do it quickly. But the one thing that stopped me completely in my tracks was in 2012, I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. And then everything stopped. And at that point, I had to sit and think about, well, what was all this for? Why are we doing all these things? I'm not even going to be alive to see all these things grow, to see these great blocks occur, to see wonderful things happen in my neighborhood that we help plant seeds for. So it gave me a chance to stop and think about, okay, what's going on here? So after I'm taking this chemotherapy and I'm going through all this barrage of treatments, I'm still having to work and looking at places around the world. But I'm now at this point, I'm thinking a lot more philosophically about the things that we're doing. One of the things we started realizing was we have two ways that we can build our communities, either based on fear or based on love. And when we build our places based on fear, we put bars on the windows. We don't put sidewalks out because we don't want kids to cross the street because we're afraid they're going to get hit by cars. Or we put benches out that we put railings on because we're afraid homeless people will lay down on them. And what happens when we create places based on our fears is they become inhospitable and inhumane and places that nobody wants to be around. As opposed to building places that are based on love, where we care about people, where we think about bringing people together and holding each other, and places that are built on love. Those are the places that we want to be in. In beauty, this idea of like, how do we get more beautiful places in our community? How do we realize that a lot of the places we have now are lacking in beauty? I reference this picture a lot. This is actually in Montmartre, Paris. I looked at this when I first saw this picture and I said, man, I wish this was in my neighborhood. If it was there, I would go have coffee here every single day. I would let my kids to work here. I love the landscaping, how it spills out of the building. I would love to work on top of this space and be here all the time. I'd show it to other people in my neighborhood and they said, well, we wish we had this in our neighborhood as well. We'd put it on our postcards. We'd have our kids work here. So I thought, well, if we all collectively wish we had more places that look like this, then why do we keep building places that look like this? And that was the big realization, was that a lot of these places that we're building don't matter. They're not places that people care about. And there is a byproduct when you build a place in a way that people don't care about it, that it doesn't have a legacy. It makes us feel like we don't matter anymore. Romance. Okay, this idea of when I'm brought out to cities now, the amazing thing is I'm walking through the streets with the mayors, and I'm walking through the streets with city staff, and they're looking at me now as the expert saying, okay, what should we do? How do we fix this? And every time I walk into a new environment, I always have this kind of blurred look, and I think, I have no idea. I have no idea even where to begin. I don't know where to start, because again, I was the computer guy, wasn't the urban planner. But what I found is that we can all make beautiful, great places as long as we focus on how do we make places feel romantic. And the amazing thing is the places that we love in our cities are the places that people take their wedding photos. They're the places that we bring our kids and we take pictures with them around. They're the places with the murals. We do it all the time whenever we make weddings. We figure out great ways to put string lights up, put pillows out, and lots of seating and great food and tables for everyone. This is an idea that we have deeply baked into our communities, and we do this all the time when we build these places based on this kind of romantic notion. All right, an intimate scale. The other amazing thing is I found that we used to build places all the time that looked like this. For thousands of years, this little small intricate streets, little small storefronts all clustered together with these small winding streets. And the thing is, these are the places that we love to be in. The places that look like this in our city now, which we have very few of, are the places that we all flock to this day. But 99% of our city does not look like this. They are wide, they are sprawling, they are cold, and they are gray. All right, so how does an individual go in and start making these changes if we understand all the problems? So I had to look for ideas. I was studying for concepts for other people around the world throughout history who had to make change and make change quickly. One of the interesting stories I found was the story of Napoleon, and many people know that Napoleon was exiled to the island of Helena. But before that, he was actually exiled another time to the Isle of Elba off of Italy. And the amazing thing was he was given sovereignty over that island and said he could do whatever he wanted there. So what he did is he looked around and he saw an island full of impoverished people. And he said, okay, well, out of boredom, let's see what we can do to fix this area. We realized, well, okay, first of all, the farming methods are from the Dark Ages. So he updated those. And then he realizes that the school curriculums were 200-300 years old. So he said, well, let's update those. Then he realized that there were no natural resources that people were using to help generate an economy in the neighborhood. So he found old iron mines from the BC times, and he got those working again. And then he created an army, and then lastly, he created a navy, and he got himself off the island, and he became the emperor of France again. And he did all of that in 300 days. So it shows you that one person can go into a community, look at all these things that people say are problems, and align them in different ways to make things work again. All right, and the community as ingredients. What we do now when we go to communities is we look around and we try to understand, this is basically a recipe we're making based on the skill sets and the assets and the resources of the community itself. So we look around and we say, okay, what do we have here? We've got cooks, or we've got construction workers, or we have refugee communities. We have all of these great cultures that we can pull off, and we can start looking at their histories and looking at the great things that they do as a society and figure out how to embed those into the environment again. This is an example of a project we did in Akron, Ohio, where we had an Italian community. We took a street that was too wide and worked with Italians and made it into a bocce ball court. There were Bhutanese refugees in the community as well that we made stages for, and we built decks so people could sit outside and eat Bhutanese food. We looked at old parking lots that had been empty for 50 years and thought, how can we rapidly transform these into people places? So we found if we just got some dirt and some hay bales, within 2 hours we could make an Italian piazza. We could take banks that had been closed for decades and started looking at these and thinking, okay, the streets are too wide, the weeds are overgrown, it's gray, nobody wants to be here. And we asked the community, what are the resources here? And they say, we have things, we just have tires or we have paint. So well, we can take the tires and the paint together and we make beautiful plazas. We also, we get really creative with the tools and the resources we use. This was us in Detroit. We were trying to build bike lanes in Detroit and realized we needed to have bollards, but bollards could be expensive, about $20 per bollard. So we thought, okay, well, what can we do to make this as long as possible? And we realized, you know what? We can use toilet plungers and PVC pipe. It gets us the same type of infrastructure on the ground. So we get really creative with these ideas. And that brings us full circle back to this return to technology. Since I started my world in this IT consulting and trying to figure out how does this play back into these problems that we're dealing with right now, because the problems are so big, the scale is so large. We have a lot of things that need to be fixed and need to be fixed rapidly. So now what we've been doing is looking at the idea of bringing in digital fabrication. So you've heard of 3D printers, you've heard of laser cutters, and CNC routers. CNC routers are basically wood that you can put plywood onto a machine that you attach to a computer, and it cuts out into the series of these puzzle pieces that you can notch together oftentimes without wood glue or screws, and make these great things. In fact, if you look at the work of WikiHouse, where they're developing these houses and great things, we started looking at those and thought, well, if you can build a house with this stuff, you could also fix your blocks. So we introduced a new library called the WikiBlock Library. You can go to our website and see this, where we've worked with Kent State University and architects in St. Paul and other places to design all of these amenities like coffee shops and park benches, and we're working on bus stops now and things like that people can go onto the website, they can download a file, they can go to their local makerspace with plywood, cut them out, and they can turn it into a chair. And you can see we can even get wood to bend with these technologies. So a lot of interesting things are happening here. This is us with a coffee kiosk that we helped design with Kent State and construct on site. This is us in our back lot behind our office itself, where we took the street and we created pedestrian islands and bulb outs, because we found that you can reduce pedestrian accidents by 50% with these. And the big questions now that we're trying to tackle, gentrification. We get asked this question all the time. What happens when you start fixing a place? People want to be there. When people want to be there, the prices go up. And when the prices go up, people get displaced. So we started looking at this idea of ultra placement. How can we get people to stay in this area, the people that live here, and then have them generate the economics from the area, make these areas economically generative for themselves? So we started looking at these ideas of, like, if you see right now, was us in Akron, Ohio, where we bought a house, and we're working with Bhutanese refugees, showing them how they can turn the house into an Airbnb that they can stay in and make it this special Bhutanese-centric Airbnb, so you can have this wonderful culture that you go to when you stay in Akron, and you're also showing this community how they can generate revenue in the area and stay in these places and fix up more of the homes. This was us actually yesterday in our parking lot. We built a greenhouse. It took us an hour and a half to put this together. So if you imagine, if we can build a greenhouse in an hour and a half, in a day we could build a house. And in a week we could build a neighborhood. And then you can add coffee shops and fix your parks and fix your plazas and all kinds of things. So it's amazing technology that we have now at our disposal to start fixing these places rapidly. Okay, that brings us back to cancer and what I was left with. I'm sitting now at home, and I'm after chemotherapy. I'm sick, and I'm on the ground, and I'm just wondering, like, how I'm going to make it through another day. When I was at my sickest and I needed help, the neighborhood that I rallied together to help do Better Blocks started coming at my door and started helping take care of my kids. They went and took my son out fishing, and they took my daughter to the movies, and they started filling up my refrigerator with food, and they started sitting with me when I was in my time of need. And the amazing thing is, what I got out of all this was a neighborhood. In fact, they gathered around me and started doing these Build a Better Jason campaigns to help me pay for my bills. So what I found is all of us are looking for this sense of place, this sense of belonging. We all have this deep desire to be loved and be cared for and to care for others as well. We all have feelings of isolation as well. And if we know that we all have these same issues, what can we do to gather our resources together and start making our world a better place together? And before I forget, as of this month, I was diagnosed as being 4 years cancer-free, so I'm fortunately going to be just fine. So with that, thank you very much.